Portland was beautiful, but I was beginning to think I was making a mistake moving here. I was lying on the third stranger's couch in a month. They were college students who liked my vibe. I didn't know how many more times I could carry my boxes across town. I had no money. I knew no one in the city, and I was sure I would soon be sleeping outside. We sat around talking about our histories, the Japanese version of Sailor Moon playing in the background. They were so fascinated with me, like I was a science project. I was thankful for their empathy, but I didn't like feeling examined. They were teenagers living off their family's money, trustafarians, as one of them casually put it. I was homeless, grateful for a few nights of safety. We didn't see the world through the same lens. They trickled off to bed one by one, until the boyfriend of one of the girls and I were the only ones in the living room. He started talking to me about an organization called New Avenues for Youth, or NAFI for short. He told me about a friend who lived in their temporary housing, and listening to me talk, he realized I didn't know about the abundance of resources Portland had to offer homeless youth, unlike Fresno. The next day, I woke up early and walked down to their day center. It felt awkward, and looking at the other youths, I could tell their experiences had been harder. I'd never slept on the streets, at least, or in a shelter. I always had a couch, sleeping in the same area as people I trusted. I didn't know their life. I wondered if I was making a mistake before it dawned on me that I was a few nights away from joining these kids. I was here for help. At first, the staff felt dubious of me. My lack of any sort of identification, paired with my natural looks, didn't scream homeless youth to them. They questioned my lack of substance use. They literally laughed out loud when I told them I had only been drunk once and had smoked weed less than 5 times. It was only when they realized they had offended me by assuming I was an addict that they believed my story. I was approved for temporary housing within a few hours. They had never had a kid like me before. Homeless, but resourceful enough to stay sheltered away from the harshness of the homeless community. Somehow able to navigate the world without relying on substances to self-medicate. They saw it as a preventative measure to make sure I didn't fall into that life. The next day, I once again packed up my boxes and lugged them across the city to my new home. It was a dorm-like setting with a giant shared living area. There was a kitchen stocked with food and every resource available right in front of me. I quickly began to adapt to my new surroundings. I had lived in group homes for 2 years. This was similar, but with vastly more freedom. The first week of moving in, they notarized all the forms I needed to finally get my identification. I sat in one of the counselor's offices as I watched her stamp her approval, and just cried. While my looks made them all initially doubt me, my sincerity proved to them I was being authentic. As soon as I had all my forms in, they'd also help me find employment. NAFI happened to have a partner shop with Ben & Jerry's. They used it as a job training program for us at-risk youth. Even though I had no retail experience, my maturity was exactly what they were looking for in a shop leader, so I was immediately asked to interview. They even gave me a $30 gift card to buy some new clothes. I bought some corduroys that, at the time, I thought were stylish. They were tan with butterflies on the back pockets and flared at the bottom. They were more feminine than anything I'd ever owned before, but I was determined to make them work. I wore a polo with a vest and strolled into my interview feeling confident as fuck. It was only 10:30 a.m., so there were no customers in the store. Instead, I found a pregnant girl named Jennifer sitting on a stool behind the counter. I tried to shake her hand, but she bluntly told me she was not moving from her pregnancy stool. I informed her of my interview with Will, and she screamed for him to come and get me. 15 minutes later, I was an employee. Will was a caseworker with NAFI. Jim, a tall man with a brute attitude, was the shop boss. My first day of work happened to be a store meeting. Apparently there had been an issue with dead names being used, and their true names not being respected. Jim played damage control quite brilliantly. Instead of making excuses, he had us all fill out forms that had us fill in our legal names and our true names. He would make sure everyone's name was respected on non-legal stuff going forward. The next day I came in for my training shift and found a rack of laminated name tags to accompany my branded shirt and hat. I walked behind the counter to where the pregnant girl who introduced herself as Jennifer sat on her pregnancy stool once again. However, her name tag didn't say Jennifer. It said Steve. Jennifer was quite the smartass, and on her form put Steve down as her true name, assuming Jim would know she was joking. However, Jim, finding the issue of names highly important, wasn't going to play those games. So Jennifer became Steve. And almost 20 years later, she's still Steve, or Stevie to almost anyone who knows her. I wore those butterfly pants to work often. While I only worked there through the summer, it introduced me to some of the most important people in my life, who I still consider close friends today. Not only Steve, but Shamika, Elena, Danielle, and even my future friend Levette's sister Destiny. Also, life-changing people who I no longer speak with, like Sabra, Natasha, Genethea, and Eric. Each one of these people, while at NAFI and Ben & Jerry's, has been pivotal in my personal development. After the summer ended, I quickly decided to head back to Fresno and try to rectify the life I left behind there. I had tools and resources now that would help me survive in my hometown. After a chaotic train trip back home, the moment I set my feet on the ground, I knew I wouldn't be in Fresno long. It wasn't home anymore. I was going to work through my issues and get my ass back to Portland. I don't regret going back to Fresno. I accomplished a lot while I was back. I had made amazing connections and realized some heavy truths. And when the time felt right, I got a train ticket back to Portland. It only took me 18 months before I was ready to move back to where I belonged. Wearing those same flared butterfly cords on my legs, ready for whatever adventure Portland had in store for me next.